The wagon wheels snapped with a crack that echoed across the empty prairie like a gunshot, and Brennan Rourke knew he was about to die out here alone. He stood beside his crippled wagon, staring at the splintered wood and bent iron rim that had been his only means of reaching the next settlement before his supplies ran out. The sun blazed overhead in a merciless afternoon sky, and the nearest town was still 2 days away on foot. He had maybe 3 days of water if he rationed carefully, and the wilderness between here and civilization was crawling with dangers he did not want to face unarmed and on foot. His rifle was fine, his supplies were intact, but without the wagon he could not carry enough to survive the journey. Brennan was a wheelwright by trade, ironically enough, but he had sold most of his tools in the last town to buy food. What remained in his wagon were the basics, enough to make minor repairs but not enough to rebuild an entire wheel hub. He crouched beside the wreckage and ran his hands over the damage, calculating what he would need. The hub had cracked clean through, the spokes had splintered, and the iron rim had warped from the impact. This was not something he could fix with rope and hope. He had been traveling for 6 weeks since leaving the Eastern Territories, searching for a place where a man could start over without questions about his past. The war had ended 3 years ago, but Brennan still carried it with him in ways that made staying in one place impossible. He had not spoken more than necessary to another person in months. Words felt heavy in his throat, weighted down by memories he could not shake and guilt he could not name. So he had packed what little he owned and pointed his wagon west, toward the frontier where silence was common and no one expected a man to explain himself, now that silence was going to kill him. Brennan stood and scanned the horizon. Grassland stretched in every direction, rolling and golden under the late summer sun. A line of dark trees marked a creek bed about a mile to the north. He could set up camp there, at least have water while he figured out what to do. Maybe he could salvage enough wood from the wagon to build a travois, drag what supplies he could carry. It would be slow and brutal, but it might keep him alive. He was unhitching his horse when he saw the figure approaching from the west. At first he thought it was a trick of the heat, a wavering mirage on the empty road. But as the shape grew closer, he could make out details. A rider on a massive horse, moving at a steady pace. Brennan's hand drifted to his rifle, then stopped. Out here, showing aggression to a stranger was a good way to start a fight you might not win. He waited, shading his eyes against the sun. The rider was big, he realized. Really big. And as they drew closer, Brennan felt his stomach tighten with recognition. Green skin, broad shoulders. The distinctive silhouette of an orc. His first instinct was to grab his rifle. His second instinct was to remember that he was stranded and helpless, and starting a confrontation would only guarantee his death. So he stood beside his broken wagon and waited, keeping his hands visible and his posture neutral. The orc woman reined in her horse about 20 feet away. She sat astride a huge draft horse that would have looked comically large under anyone else, but under her, it seemed perfectly proportioned. She wore practical traveling clothes, leather pants and a simple linen shirt, with a heavy cloak rolled behind her saddle. A pair of saddlebags bulged with supplies. Her skin was a deep forest green, her black hair pulled back in a thick braid. Small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her dark eyes studied him with an expression he could not read. They looked at each other in silence for a long moment. Brennan had seen orcs before, during the war and after. He had fought beside some and against others, depending on which clans had allied with which human kingdoms. But he had never been alone with one like this. Just 2 people on an empty road with no witnesses and no rules. The orc woman looked at him, then at his wagon, then back at him. "Wheel is broken," she said. Her voice was deeper than a human woman's with a slight roughness to it. "Yes," Brennan said. His own voice came out rusty from disuse. "You have tools to fix it, not enough." She nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she had already guessed. Then she dismounted in one smooth motion and walked toward the wagon. Brennan tensed but did not move. She crouched beside the broken wheel, running her large hands over the damage the same way he had done. "Hub is cracked," she said. "Spokes are split. Rim is bent." "I know." She glanced up at him. "You are a wheelwright." It was not a question. Brennan frowned. "How did you know your hands and the way you looked at the damage? You know what is wrong, you just do not have what you need to fix it." She stood up, brushing dust from her knees. "I have tools and wood. I can fix this." Brennan stared at her. "Why would you help me?" The orc woman met his eyes. "Because you will die if I do not, and I do not want to pass your bones on my way back through here." She walked back to her horse and began unlashing a large bundle from behind her saddle. "Also, I am a wainwright. I build wagons and wheels. It offends me to see one broken when it could be fixed." He did not know what to say to that. He watched as she hauled down a heavy tool roll and a bundle of seasoned wood. She carried them to the wagon as if they weighed nothing, though Brennan knew the tools alone had to be 40 pounds. "My name is Karga," she said, setting down her supplies. "Karga Strongarm of the Iron Ridge clan, or I was before they cast me out." Brennan hesitated. "Brennan Rourke." "Well, Brennan Rourke, if you want your wagon fixed, I need you to help. I cannot do this alone." She knelt beside the wheel and began unpacking her tools. "Can you follow instructions?" "Yes." "Good, then let us begin." What followed were the strangest 20 minutes of Brennan's life. Karga worked with the focused intensity of a master craftsman, her large hands moving with surprising delicacy as she assessed the damage and planned her repairs. She barked instructions at Brennan in a tone that brooked no argument, and he found himself obeying without question. He held pieces in place while she hammered, braced the wagon while she levered out the broken hub, handed her tools before she even asked for them. She had brought a spare hub, already carved and fitted with iron bands. "I make these for trade," she explained as she worked. "Travelers always break wheels. It is good business." She fitted the new hub onto the axle with a few precise strikes of her hammer, then began fitting new spokes into place. Her movements were economical and sure, the work of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Brennan found himself watching her with fascination. He had spent his whole adult life working with wood and metal, and he recognized mastery when he saw it. Karga was better than he was, probably better than anyone he had ever worked with. Her hands knew the wood, knew exactly how much force to use, where to place each piece for maximum strength. "How long have you been a wainwright?" he asked. "Since I was 12. My mother taught me, and her mother taught her." Karga fitted the last spoke into place and began wrapping the rim with wet leather that would shrink tight as it dried. "It is traditional work for orc women in my clan. Men do the smithing and the farming. Women do the building and the crafting. That is different from humans." "Yes." "Humans have strange ideas about what women can do." She glanced at him, and he thought he saw amusement in her dark eyes. "Though I notice you have not questioned my skill. I can see you know what you are doing. Good. You are smarter than most humans then." She finished securing the rim and stood back to examine her work. "There. It will hold. The leather will take an hour to dry fully, but you can travel on it now if you go slowly." Brennan looked at the wheel. It was perfect, better than the original had been. "How much do I owe you?" Karga packed up her tools. "Nothing. I told you I do not want to pass your bones. I should pay you something. Do you have money? A little. Then keep it. You will need it more than I will." She hefted her tool roll and carried it back to her horse. "Where are you going?" "West. To the frontier settlements." "Why?" The question was direct, almost blunt. Brennan found himself answering before he thought about it. To find somewhere quiet. Karga nodded as if this made perfect sense. She lashed her tools back onto her saddle and checked her horse's gear. Then she paused, her back to him. "There is a stream about a mile north," she said. "Good water sheltered by trees. I am going to camp there tonight. The leather needs to dry and my horse needs rest." She glanced over her shoulder at him. "You should camp there too. Let the wheel set properly before you push on." Brennan hesitated. Camping near an orc went against every instinct he had learned during the war. But Karga had just saved his life, and she could have killed him easily if she wanted to. And there was something in her eyes, a loneliness that matched his own, that made him nod. "All right," he said. They traveled the mile to the creek in silence, Karga on her horse and Brennan driving his wagon slowly. The wheel held perfectly. They found a good spot in the shade of cottonwood trees, where the creek ran clear over smooth stones. Karga set up her camp on one side of the clearing. Brennan set up his on the other, maintaining a careful distance. But as the sun set and the sky turned orange and purple, Brennan found himself watching her. She moved around her camp with easy efficiency, starting a fire, setting up a small cooking pot, tending to her horse. She did not speak, did not look at him. But there was something peaceful about her presence, something that made the silence feel comfortable rather than heavy. Brennan made his own fire and heated some beans. He sat on his bedroll and ate slowly, watching the flames. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to share space with another person. It felt strange and familiar at the same time. "You do not talk much," Karga said suddenly. Brennan looked up. She was sitting by her own fire, maybe 30 feet away, watching him. He shrugged. Why not? He did not know how to answer that. He looked back at his fire. "I do not talk much either," Karga said. "My clan cast me out because I refused to marry the man they chose for me. Orc clans do not tolerate disobedience, especially from women. So now I travel alone, selling my skills to whoever needs them." She poked at her fire with a stick. "It is lonely, but it is better than being married to a man who would have beaten me for being better at crafting than he was." Brennan looked at her. In the firelight, her green skin had a warm glow and her eyes reflected the flames. She looked sad and defiant at the same time. "I am sorry," he said. "Do not be. I made my choice." She stood up and walked toward the creek. "But I miss talking to people. I miss having someone who understands." She knelt by the water and splashed her face. Brennan watched her, feeling something stir in his chest that he had not felt in a long time. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. She was running from something just like he was. She carried silence like a shield, just like he did. He stood up and walked to his wagon. He rummaged in his supplies and found a small bottle of whiskey he had been saving for emergencies. He walked across the clearing to where Karga stood by the creek. "Here," he said, offering her the bottle. She looked at it, then at him. "What is this?" "Whiskey for, I do not know, for fixing my wheel, for not being alone tonight." Karga took the bottle and examined it. Then she uncorked it and took a long drink. She coughed a little and handed it back. "That is strong." "Yes, I like it." She sat down on a flat rock by the water. After a moment, Brennan sat down next to her. Not too close, but close enough to pass the bottle back and forth. They sat in silence for a while, sharing the whiskey and listening to the creek. The night air was warm and full of insect sounds. Stars began to appear overhead, more stars than Brennan had ever seen in the cities. "Why are you running?" Karga asked quietly. Brennan took a drink and felt the burn in his throat. "I was in the war." "So was I, on the other side, probably. Probably." He handed her the bottle. "I did things I am not proud of. I saw things I cannot forget. And when I came home, everyone wanted me to just go back to normal. Pretend it never happened. I could not do it, so you left." "Yes," Karga nodded. She took another drink. "I killed 3 men in the war, humans. They were trying to burn my village. I was 16. She stared at the water. "I can still see their faces. I do not regret killing them. They would have killed my family, but I remember." "Yes," Brennan said softly. "You remember." They passed the bottle back and forth until it was empty. The whiskey made everything feel softer, the edges of Brennan's memories less sharp. He found himself talking, really talking, for the first time in years. He told Karga about the war, about the friends he had lost, about the way his hands shook sometimes for no reason. She listened without judgment, nodding in understanding, and she talked too. She told him about her clan, about the pressure to conform, about her love of crafting and building things. She told him about the man they wanted her to marry, a warrior who thought her skills were unnatural for a woman. She told him about the day she refused and the way her own mother had turned her out with nothing but her tools and her horse. "You miss them?" Brennan asked. "Every day, but I cannot go back. They would force me to submit, and I cannot live like that." She looked at him. "Do you miss your home?" "I do not know if I ever really had one, not one that felt right." "Then maybe you will find one out west." "Maybe." They sat in silence for a while longer. The whiskey was gone, the fire was burning low, but neither of them moved. Brennan realized he felt more at peace than he had in years. There was something about Karga's presence, her straightforward honesty and her shared pain, that made him feel less alone. "Thank you," he said finally, "for fixing the wheel, for this." Karga stood up slowly. She was unsteady on her feet, and Brennan realized they were both a little drunk. "You are welcome, Brennan Rourke. You are not as stupid as most humans I have met." He laughed, surprised by the sound of it. "That is high praise. Yes, do not waste it." She walked back toward her camp, then paused and looked back at him. "Will you be gone in the morning?" "I should be. I need to reach the next town." "Yes, you should." She was quiet for a moment. "Travel safely, wheelwright." "You too, wainwright." She smiled, just a little, and Brennan felt something warm spread through his chest. Then she turned and walked to her bedroll, and he walked back to his. But as Brennan lay under the stars that night, staring up at the infinite sky, he found he could not sleep. His mind kept returning to the orc woman across the clearing, to the way she had worked with such skill and confidence, to the way she had listened to him without trying to fix him or tell him what he should feel, to the loneliness in her eyes that matched his own. He had thought he wanted silence and solitude, but tonight with Karga he had felt something different. He had felt understood. When he finally drifted off to sleep, his dreams were quieter than they had been in years. Brennan woke to the smell of cooking meat. He sat up, disoriented, and saw Karga tending a fire with a spit roasting over it. She looked over at him and jerked her head in invitation. "Rabbit," she called. "I caught it this morning. Come eat." He got up and walked over, still groggy. The sun was barely up, the sky pale gold. Karga handed him a portion of the cooked meat on a flat piece of wood. It was perfectly done, seasoned with herbs he did not recognize. "Thank you," he said. They ate in comfortable silence. Brennan found himself studying her in the morning light. She was younger than he had first thought, maybe mid-20s. There was a scar on her left forearm, pale against her green skin. Her hands were calloused and strong, the hands of someone who worked hard every day. "Your wheel is ready," she said when they finished eating. "The leather is dry. You can leave whenever you want." Brennan nodded. He should be relieved. He should be eager to get back on the road, to put this strange encounter behind him. But instead he felt something like disappointment. "Where are you going?" he asked. "East, back toward the territories. I have a commission to build a wagon for a merchant there. It will take me 3 weeks to reach him." 3 weeks. In the opposite direction from where Brennan was heading. He told himself it did not matter. She was a stranger, an orc, someone he had met by chance and would never see again. That was how things worked out here, but he did not want it to be true. They packed up their camps in silence. Brennan hitched his horse to the wagon and checked the wheel one more time. It was perfect, solid and true. Karga had saved his life, and he had nothing to give her but thanks. She mounted her horse and looked down at him. "Goodbye, Brennan Rourke, may you find your quiet place. Goodbye, Karga Strongarm, may you find whatever you are looking for." She smiled at that, a real smile that showed her tusks. Then she turned her horse east and rode away without looking back. Brennan stood and watched her go until she was just a speck on the horizon. Then he climbed onto his wagon and pointed west, toward the frontier, toward his future. But as he traveled that day, he could not stop thinking about her. The town of Millbrook was exactly what Brennan had expected. A collection of rough buildings clustered around a mill and a general store, full of hard-faced settlers trying to scratch out a living on the frontier. He sold some of his supplies to the storekeeper and asked about work. "Can you build?" The storekeeper asked. He was a thin man with suspicious eyes. "I can work with wood and metal. I am a wheelwright by trade. We could use one. Folks are always breaking wheels out here. You can set up shop in the old barn at the edge of town. Owner died last winter, no family. Place is yours if you fix the roof." So Brennan fixed the roof and set up his workshop. He made wheels and repaired wagons and slowly built a reputation as a skilled craftsman. The work was steady and the pay was fair. He rented a small room above the general store and tried to build a life. But something was wrong. The silence that had comforted him before now felt oppressive. The solitude he had craved now felt like loneliness. He would sit in his workshop in the evenings and realize he had not spoken to anyone all day except to discuss business. The townspeople were friendly enough, but they kept their distance. He was an outsider, a man with a past he did not discuss, and every night he thought about Karga. He wondered where she was, if she was safe, if she was lonely too. He found himself imagining conversations with her, telling her about the wheel he had built that day or the difficult customer he had dealt with. He pictured her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. It was absurd. He had known her for less than a day. She was an orc and he was human, and even if he could find her again, there was no future for them. Interspecies relationships were taboo, forbidden by both human and orc society. He would be shunned, she would be endangered. It was impossible, but he could not stop thinking about her. 3 months passed. Winter came to the frontier, hard and cold. Brennan worked in his shop and tried to be content. He was safe, he had work, he had everything he thought he wanted. But the silence that had once been a refuge now felt like a prison. He was working on a wagon wheel one gray afternoon when the storekeeper came to his workshop. "There is someone here asking for you," the man said. He looked uncomfortable. "An orc woman. Says she knows you." Brennan's heart jumped into his throat. He set down his tools carefully and walked out into the street. Karga sat on her horse in the middle of town, looking out of place among the human buildings. People were staring at her from windows and doorways, some with curiosity, most with suspicion. But she ignored them, her eyes scanning the street until they found Brennan, their gazes locked. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Brennan was walking toward her, his feet moving before his brain caught up. He stopped a few feet from her horse, looking up at her. "Hello," he said. "Hello," she replied. They stared at each other. Karga looked tired, Brennan noticed. There were dark circles under her eyes and her clothes were dusty from travel. "I finished my commission," she said. "I was heading back west, I thought. I remembered you said you were coming to the frontier. I asked in the last 3 towns if anyone knew a wheelwright named Brennan. The storekeeper in Cedar Ridge said you were here. You came looking for me." Yes, she dismounted, moving stiffly. I do not know why, I wanted to see you again. Brennan felt something fierce and warm bloom in his chest. I am glad you did. They stood in the street, ignoring the stares of the townspeople. Brennan did not know what to say. There was so much he wanted to tell her, but the words felt tangled in his throat. Are you hungry? He asked finally. I have a room above the store. I can make food. Yes, I am hungry. He led her horse to the stable behind his workshop and helped her unsaddle it. Then he took her up the narrow stairs to his room. It was small and sparse, just a bed and a table and a stove, but it was warm and dry. Karga sank down onto the only chair and rubbed her face. I have been traveling for 4 days straight. Why? She looked at him. Because I could not stop thinking about you. The words hung in the air between them. Brennan felt his heart pounding. He crossed to the stove and busied himself making tea, needing something to do with his hands. I could not stop thinking about you either, he said quietly. This is stupid, Karga said. We met for 1 day, 1 night. It should not matter, I know. But it does matter. Yes. Brennan poured tea into 2 cups and handed her one. She wrapped her large hands around it and breathed in the steam. He sat on the edge of his bed facing her. I do not know what to do about this, he said honestly. I have never felt like this before. And even if you feel the same way, there is no future for us. Your people and mine do not accept this kind of thing. I know. My clan would kill me if they knew I was even thinking about a human this way, and your people would drive you out of town if you took up with an orc. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. But I do not care about my clan anymore. They cast me out, and you do not seem to care much about what other people think. I do not. Then maybe we can figure something out. Hope surged through Brennan, fierce and unexpected. What are you saying? I am saying I want to stay. Here with you. I am tired of being alone. I am tired of traveling. I want to build something that lasts, and I think you want that too. I do. But Karga, the people here, will have to accept it or not. I am a skilled wainwright. You are a skilled wheelwright. Together we could build a real business, the kind people need out here. They might not like it, but they will need us. She set down her cup and looked at him steadily. I am not saying it will be easy. I am saying it might be worth it. Brennan stared at her. She was right. It would not be easy. There would be prejudice and obstacles and danger. But the alternative was continuing as he had been, silent and alone and slowly dying inside. Yes, he said, it is worth it. Karga smiled, and Brennan felt like he could breathe properly for the first time in months. The reaction from the town was about what they expected. Some people were openly hostile, refusing to do business with them. Others were wary but willing to tolerate the arrangement as long as they got good work. A few, surprisingly, were supportive. Life on the frontier is hard enough, the storekeeper said when Brennan explained the situation. If you two can stand each other, that is more than most married couples can say. Just keep your heads down and do good work. The rest will sort itself out. So they did. Brennan and Karga set up a joint workshop, combining their skills and their tools. They worked side by side, building wheels and wagons and fixing anything that needed fixing. They were good together, their skills complementing each other perfectly. What Brennan lacked in strength, Karga provided. What she lacked in fine detail work, he supplied. But more than that, they were good for each other. Karga drew Brennan out of his silence. She asked him questions, told him stories, made him laugh. She did not try to fix his past or make him forget the war. She just listened and understood and gave him space to be himself. And Brennan gave Karga something she had never had before, acceptance without conditions. He did not expect her to be anything other than what she was. He admired her skill, valued her opinions, and treated her as an equal partner in everything they did. Slowly, over the long winter months, their partnership deepened into something more. It started with small things. Hands brushing as they passed tools, lingering looks across the workshop. The way Karga smiled when she saw him in the morning. The way Brennan found excuses to stand close to her while they worked. One evening in late winter, they were working late to finish a rush order. The workshop was warm from the forge, and they were both tired. Karga was fitting an iron rim to a wheel, and Brennan was holding it steady. She hammered the last rivet into place and stepped back to examine her work. "Good," she said. "That is the last one." Brennan set down the wheel and stretched his aching back. "We make a good team." "Yes, we do." They stood in the warm workshop, covered in soot and sawdust, smiling at each other. And then, without planning it, without thinking about it, Brennan stepped forward and kissed her. It was gentle and tentative, his lips brushing against hers. Her tusks pressed against his face, unfamiliar but not unpleasant. For a moment Karga froze. Then she wrapped her arms around him and kissed him back, fierce and hungry. They broke apart, breathing hard. Karga's eyes were wide. "Was that all right?" Brennan asked. "Yes, do it again." So he did. And this time when they kissed, it was deeper, more certain. Brennan felt like he was coming home after a long journey. Karga's hands were gentle despite their strength, cradling his face like he was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, they were both trembling. "I love you," Brennan said. The words came out rough and unpracticed, but they were true. "I think I have loved you since that night by the creek." Karga pressed her forehead against his. "I love you too. I did not think I could love a human, but you are different. You see me. Really see me. You see me too." They stood holding each other in the warm workshop while the snow fell outside. Brennan felt something inside him, something that had been broken and silent for years, start to heal. Spring came to the frontier like a promise. The snow melted. The grass turned green, and Brennan and Karga's business thrived. Word spread about the wheelwright and the wainwright who could fix anything, and people came from miles around to use their services. Some still grumbled about the interspecies relationship, but most admitted that the work was too good to pass up. Brennan and Karga moved out of their separate rooms and rented a small house at the edge of town. It was simple. Just 3 rooms and a garden plot, but it was theirs. They set up house together with a sense of quiet joy, each of them marveling at the simple fact of having someone to come home to. They learned each other slowly and carefully. Brennan learned that Karga sang while she worked, old orc songs in a language he did not understand. She learned that he had nightmares sometimes, and the best thing she could do was hold him until he fell back asleep. He learned that she liked wildflowers and sweet things. She learned that he found peace in routine and small acts of care. They were not perfect. They argued sometimes about the best way to do a job, or who had used whose tools without asking. But they always talked it through, neither of them willing to let anger fester in silence. One warm evening in late spring, they were sitting on the porch of their house watching the sunset. Karga was mending a shirt and Brennan was whittling a small carving, something he had taken up as a way to keep his hands busy in the evenings. "What are you making?" Karga asked. Brennan held up the piece of wood. It was starting to take the shape of a horse. "I am not sure yet. Maybe a horse. Maybe a dog. It looks good. Thank you." He went back to carving, the knife making soft, scraping sounds. "Karga, can I ask you something, always? Do you ever regret leaving your clan, your family?" She set down her mending and thought about it. "Sometimes. I miss my mother. I miss my sisters, but I do not regret the choice I made. If I had stayed, I would have been miserable. I would have been trapped." She looked at him. "Why do you ask?" "I just want to make sure you are happy, that this is what you want." Karga reached over and took his hand. Her palm was warm and calloused. "Brennan, I am happier than I have ever been. I have work I love, a home, and you. What more could I want? I want you to be sure, because I am going to ask you something important and I need to know you will not regret it. She turned to face him fully, her expression serious. What are you going to ask? Brennan set down his carving and took both her hands in his. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. Karga Strongarm, will you marry me? She stared at him, her dark eyes wide. Marry you? Yes. I know it is complicated. I know neither of our peoples will approve, but I do not care. I want you to be my wife. I want to build a life with you, officially and permanently. I want everyone to know that we belong to each other. Karga's eyes filled with tears. You know this will make things harder for us. I know. People will treat us worse. Some will refuse to do business with us at all. I know. We might have to leave this town and find somewhere more accepting. Then we will leave together. She laughed, a sound halfway between joy and tears. You are stubborn. So are you. That is why we are perfect for each other. Karga pulled him into a fierce hug. Yes, yes, I will marry you. They held each other on the porch while the sun set and the sky turned purple. Brennan felt complete in a way he had never felt before. He had spent so long running from his past, hiding in silence, trying to disappear. But Karga had found him anyway. She had fixed something in him that he had not even known was broken. The wedding was small and private. There was no minister willing to perform the ceremony, so they wrote their own vows and spoke them to each other in the workshop, with the storekeeper and his wife as witnesses. Brennan promised to honor Karga's strength and skill, to stand beside her no matter what came. Karga promised to cherish Brennan's quiet courage, to be his partner in all things. They exchanged rings they had forged themselves in the workshop, simple bands of iron inlaid with copper. And when they kissed to seal their vows, the storekeeper's wife cried and her husband smiled. Well, he said, that is the damnedest thing I have ever seen. Congratulations. News of the wedding spread through town quickly. The reaction was mixed. Some people were outraged, claiming it was unnatural and wrong. Others shrugged and went about their business. A few offered quiet congratulations, but there was a darker undercurrent. Some of the more prejudiced townspeople began talking about driving Brennan and Karga out. They gathered in the saloon and muttered about property values and corrupting influences. Brennan heard the talk and tried to ignore it, but he could see the worry in Karga's eyes. Maybe we should leave, she said one night. Find somewhere more remote where people will not bother us. No, Brennan said firmly. We built something here. We have a home and a business. I am not letting bigots drive us away. But if they come for us, then we will deal with it, together. The crisis came 2 weeks after the wedding. Brennan was working late in the workshop when he heard shouting from the house. He dropped his tools and ran, his heart in his throat. He found 6 men standing outside his house, drunk and angry. Karga stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, facing them down. Get out of here, one of the men slurred. We do not want your kind in our town. This is my home, Karga said, her voice level but hard. I am not going anywhere. You are an orc. You do not belong here, and neither does your orc-loving husband. Brennan stepped up beside Karga. You need to leave. Now. The leader of the group, a big man named Duncan who worked at the mill, sneered at him. Or what? You will hide behind your monster wife. I will defend my home, Brennan said. His hand drifted to the hammer hanging from his belt. By whatever means necessary. The men laughed, but there was uncertainty in their eyes. Brennan was not a big man, but he was a veteran, and Karga was an orc. Neither of them would go down easily. This is not over, Duncan said. You are not welcome here. Then find another wheelwright, Brennan shot back. Find another wainwright. Good luck getting your wagons fixed without us. That gave them pause. The frontier economy ran on wagons and wheels, and Brennan and Karga were the only skilled craftspeople for 100 miles. Driving them out would be cutting off their own noses to spite their faces. Duncan spat in the dirt. You will regret this. I doubt it. The men left, stumbling and muttering. Brennan watched them go, his heart still pounding. When they were out of sight, he turned to Karga. Are you all right? Yes, but they will come back, I know. They went inside and barred the door. That night they slept in shifts, taking turns watching the windows. But the men did not return. The next morning the storekeeper came to see them. He looked uncomfortable. I heard about last night, he said. Duncan and his friends are drunk idiots, but they are angry drunk idiots. You need to be careful. We will, Brennan said. There is more. Some of the other townsfolk are talking about a vote to officially run you out of town. Karga's face hardened. Can they do that, legally? No, but out here laws are flexible. If enough people want you gone, they will find a way. He sighed. I am sorry, I like you both. You are good people and you do good work, but you knew this would not be easy. After he left, Brennan and Karga sat in their workshop and faced reality. They could stay and fight, but it would be a constant battle. Every day would be a struggle against prejudice and hatred. Or they could leave and find somewhere new, somewhere they might have a chance at peace. What do you want to do? Brennan asked. Karga looked around the workshop at the tools they had accumulated, the projects they were working on. I want to stay. This is our home. We built it together. But if we stay, it will be hard. Everything worth having is hard. She took his hand. But I will not force you to fight this battle. If you want to leave, I will go with you. Brennan thought about it. He thought about running again, starting over somewhere new, but he was tired of running. And more than that, he believed in what they had built here. They had proven that a human and an orc could work together, live together, love each other. That was worth fighting for. We stay, he said. And we show them that we belong here as much as anyone. Over the next few months, they did exactly that. They worked harder than ever, taking on every job offered to them and doing it better than anyone could have asked for. They were polite to everyone, even the people who were rude to them. They became indispensable to the town's economy, and slowly, grudgingly, the town began to accept them. It was not a dramatic change. There was no moment when everyone suddenly decided they were wrong about interspecies relationships, but individual people started treating them with more respect. The farmer whose wagon they had repaired in record time defended them at a town meeting. The merchant whose wheel they had fixed free of charge when he was broke told Duncan to shut up about the orc problem. One by one, people who had worked with them and seen their skill and integrity started speaking up for them. By the time summer turned to fall, Brennan and Karga had won over enough of the town that the talk of running them out disappeared. They would never be universally accepted, but they had earned their place. One evening they sat on their porch watching the sunset, just like they had on the night Brennan proposed. Karga leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. We did it, she said softly. Yes, we did. It was not easy, no, but you were right, it was worth it. She turned to look at him. Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, staying here, fighting all those battles. Brennan thought about the man he had been when his wheel broke on that empty road. Silent, alone, running from his past and himself. Then he thought about the man he was now. Still scarred, still carrying his history, but no longer alone, no longer silent. Never, he said. You fixed me, Karga, that night by the creek and every day since. You fixed something in me that I thought was permanently broken. You fixed me too, she said. You gave me a home. A real one, not just a place to sleep. You gave me acceptance and love. You made me believe that being myself was enough. They kissed as the sun set, their shadows blending together in the golden light. The years that followed were not perfect. There were still hard times, still moments of prejudice and difficulty. But Brennan and Karga faced them together. their partnership strengthened by every challenge they overcame. Their business grew. They hired an apprentice, a young half-orc boy whose human father and orc mother had both died, leaving him with nowhere to go. They taught him their skills and gave him a home. He was the first of several outcasts who found their way to the wheelwright and the wainwright who accepted everyone. Karga never reconciled with her clan, but she made peace with it. She was building her own family now, one based on choice and love rather than blood and tradition. Brennan's nightmares faded. They never went away completely, but with Karga beside him, they lost their power. He learned to talk about the war, to process his memories instead of just carrying them. The silence that had once protected him was no longer necessary. He had found something better, a partner who understood. 3 years after they married, on a cool autumn evening, they sat on their porch watching the sunset. It had become a ritual for them, this quiet time together at the end of each day. Karga was carving something, and Brennan was mending a harness. "I was thinking," Karga said, not looking up from her work. "About what?" "About children." Brennan's hands stilled. They had never talked about this before. "Children? Yes, I know we probably cannot have them ourselves. Human and orc biology does not work that way usually. But we could adopt. There are always orphans on the frontier, children who need homes." She finally looked at him. "What do you think?" Brennan thought about it. The idea scared him if he was honest. He had never imagined himself as a father. But then, he had never imagined himself married to an orc, running a successful business, part of a community. And all of those impossible things had become his life. "I think you would be an amazing mother," he said slowly. "And I think we could give a child a good life." "A better life than either of us had," Karga smiled. "So that is a yes." "That is a yes." They adopted their first child 6 months later, a little human girl named Emma whose parents had died of fever. She was 4 years old, scared and grieving. But Karga held her gently and Brennan sang her to sleep, and slowly she began to heal. 2 years after that, they took in a young orc boy whose clan had cast him out for being too small and weak. His name was Grunk, and he was 7 years old. He was terrified of humans at first, but Brennan won him over with patience and kindness. Emma and Grunk became siblings, despite their different species. They fought and played and loved each other with the ferocity of children. Brennan and Karga raised them to see past the prejudices of both races, to judge people by their character rather than their skin color or tusks. The children learned the crafts of wheelwrighting and wainwrighting, working in the shop alongside their parents. Emma had a natural talent for fine detail work. Grunk was strong and clever with his hands. Both of them were proud to carry on the family business. Brennan sometimes marveled at how his life had turned out. He had come west looking for silence and solitude, expecting to die alone. Instead, he had found love, family, purpose. He had a wife who understood him, children who adored him, and work that gave him satisfaction. And it had all started with a broken wheel on an empty road. One evening, when Emma was 10 and Grunk was 13, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was a summer evening, warm and golden. The children were arguing cheerfully about the best way to fix a warped wheel rim. Karga was smiling as she listened to them, her hand in Brennan's. "Do you remember the day we met?" Brennan asked quietly. "Every detail," Karga said. "You looked so lost standing there beside your broken wagon. I almost rode past. I told myself it was not my problem, that helping a human would only bring trouble. What made you stop, honestly?" "I was lonely. I saw another person in trouble and I thought maybe just this once I do not have to be alone." She squeezed his hand. "Best decision I ever made. Mine too. You saved my life that day. You saved mine too, just in a different way." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to their children and watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Brennan thought about the man he had been, silent and broken, carrying his pain like a weight. That man felt like a stranger now. "I fixed your wheel in 20 minutes, Karga said suddenly. "But it took you months to fix my broken trust in people, to make me believe that not everyone would reject me." "And you fixed my broken silence in one night," Brennan replied. "You made me remember how to talk, how to connect, how to be human again. We fixed each other." "Yes, we did." Emma and Grunk called them in for dinner, their voices bright with laughter. Brennan and Karga stood up, still holding hands, and walked into their home together. Inside, the table was set and the food was warm and their family was waiting. Brennan looked around at the life they had built and felt profound gratitude. He had been so lost, so convinced that he was meant to be alone. But Karga had found him anyway, had seen past his silence to the man beneath. She had loved him despite the obstacles, had fought beside him when things got hard, had given him a family and a future. And in return, he had given her everything he had. His love, his loyalty, his absolute commitment. He had stood beside her when her own people cast her out, had defended her against prejudice, had built her a home where she could finally be herself. They had saved each other. Two broken people who found each other on an empty road and decided to take a chance. And from that chance, they had built something beautiful. After dinner, after the children were in bed, Brennan and Karga stood in their workshop. They had a big commission to finish, a full wagon for a merchant family moving west. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, their movements synchronized from years of partnership. "You ever miss the quiet?" Karga asked. "The solitude you were looking for when you came west?" Brennan paused in his work and looked at her. Her green skin glowed in the lamplight, and her dark eyes were full of warmth. He could hear the children sleeping in the house next door, safe and loved. He could smell the familiar scents of wood and metal and oil. He could feel the calluses on his hands from years of good work. "No," he said honestly. "I thought I wanted silence, but what I really needed was understanding, peace, love. You gave me all of that." Karga set down her tools and crossed to him. She cupped his face in her large, gentle hands. "You gave me the same. You are my home, Brennan Rourke. You always will be." They kissed, tender and sure, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something that would last. Outside, the frontier night was full of sounds. Wind in the grass, owls hunting, the distant howl of wolves. But inside the workshop, there was only warmth and light and the quiet joy of two people who had fixed each other's broken pieces and become whole. The years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. Emma grew into a skilled artisan who could build wheels as fine as anything her parents had made. Grunk became strong and wise, a bridge between orc and human communities. Both children eventually married and had children of their own, creating a family that spanned two species and proved that love could overcome any divide. Brennan and Karga grew old together. Their hands became more gnarled with arthritis, their hair turned gray, but their love never diminished. They still sat on their porch every evening, watching the sunset and talking about their day. They still worked in their shop, though they took more breaks and moved more slowly. They still kissed goodnight and held each other through the dark hours. One cool autumn evening, when Brennan was in his 60s and Karga not far behind, they sat on their familiar porch. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, a mixed group of human and half-orc children who saw no barriers between them. "We did good," Karga said softly. "Yes. We did better than good. We did something amazing. Do you think they will remember us, our grandchildren, and their children after that?" Brennan watched the children playing, laughing, completely comfortable with each other's differences. I think they will remember that we loved each other. And that love was stronger than hate or fear or prejudice. That is a pretty good legacy. Karga leaned her head on his shoulder. I would fix that wheel again, even knowing all the hard times that would come. I would stop on that road and help you every single time. And I would fall in love with you every single time, in any life, in any world. They sat together as the sun set, two old craftspeople who had built more than wheels and wagons. They had built a life, a family, a future. They had taken broken pieces and made them whole. They had proven that the most unlikely love could be the strongest. And when Brennan thought back to that desperate day on the empty road, when his wheel had broken, and he thought his life was over, he could only feel grateful. That broken wheel had brought him everything that mattered. It had brought him Karga. She had fixed his broken wheel in 20 minutes. And in one night of honest conversation by a creek under the stars, she had fixed his broken silence, his broken heart, his broken spirit. She had given him back his voice and his hope and his ability to love. And he had done the same for her. Together, they had built something that would outlast them both, a testament to the power of love to overcome any obstacle. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, Brennan took Karga's hand and held it tight. They had decades more to live, decades more of sunsets and grandchildren and good work. But in that moment, he was simply grateful for every day they had been given, every sunrise and sunset they had shared. I love you, he said. I love you too, she replied. And on the frontier, in a small town that had learned to look past differences, a human man and an orc woman sat together in perfect peace. Their love a quiet revolution that had changed the world around them. One wheel, one heart, one day at a time.